Hello future tech leaders, I am Sindhuja. Based on my own experience, I know that learning the right skills can shape our future. What if I say learning was as thrilled as the tech world itself? There we go. A cloud foundation, that's exactly what you will experience. From day one, you will be immersed in the interactive sessions and expert-led courses that covers most of the widely used technologies in the zone of data science to cloud computing, which brings more light to the life of a techie. I'm so excited to help you and unlock the true potential of a technology. Well, then why to wait? Let's see what it unfolds.
You are looking at accessing of storage, like we mentioned the first slide itself, that these are accessible via RST. They are accessible via HTTP, HTTPS. For accessing these resources, you will have to use a URL over here. Right. Whatever account name you have given. If you remember, I mentioned the name as Subhash 3004. The reason for that is it has to be unique. It has to be a unique value. Now currently you see the URL is your account name of Blocker Windows.net. You can simplify this. You can specify your own domain over here by using a domain mapping. And once you have that domain, mapping like how you do it for your web applications. Same way, you can create a name record over here and you can do a mapping with as verified. Through these steps, what you will be able to do is you will be able to associate your domain over here for storage account as a service. Let's get into details of blob storage. As part of blob storage, this is the structure how the details will get stored. I already discussed about the use cases earlier while I was discussing need for storage and what are the options available there. Audio files, video files, your backup data. I mentioned about number of use cases for storing these contents. The step 1 is creation of storage account. Within storage account, you will have containers to be created. And within each of these containers, you will have your blob. Now, when I say blob over here, blob refers to one file. And this single file that we are talking about can go up to 5 TB. Single file. And all the files combined, it can go up to 5 TB. If you look at the option over here, let me first create this resource before we get into next steps. I can show you the options while we are discussing it. To now, if you see, we have taken a standard account. Let's go to review and create. I am not sure how many of you all would realize this. But slowly and steadily, Microsoft keeps upgrading their services, upgrading the UI, keeps adding more and more features. All this is happening because of the customers' feedback. Once it has got this created, if you see things like events data migration, some of these are part of V2. They were not available in V1. the older or the legacy version of storage account. If I scroll below, there is a section over here which is Blob service. Within Blob service, let me go ahead and create a container over here. I can specify whatever container name I want. This need not be unique, but it has to be small case. There are certain restrictions that we have once it comes to the storage account. And the names that we use for the storage account and the names that we use for resources within storage account. Whether it is file share, tables or queues, right? Or even containers. For containers, let's mention over here as say images container. What we are creating over here can be basically mapped to a drive, where a storage account, you see, is like a hard disk bottomless storage. Within that, you can create your drives over here. Within each of these drives, you can create number of folders and store your files inside it. Whatever access you want. If you see the options available, I don't want any anonymous access. Now, this is a very important point once it comes to security. Lot of people have a feeling that wherever you have any resource available via REST APIs or any resource available via REST API or HTTPS, it is not a secure service. Which is not true. You can specify whatever security options you want over here. There are a lot of other ways of securing this environment as well, which I will come to as I proceed further. But here if you see, there are options of private or non-universe access. And you have options for allowing access to the users. That is, anonymous users for a specific file or for a bunch of files. If you want multiple files, to give access for multiple files and list those files, then you go for container-based anonymous access. In generic scenarios, it is recommended unless you have a marketing content that you want to share with everyone. Go for private non-universe access. From encryption perspective, if you want to encrypt the container, you can check for the options available here. As of now, I don't have any encryption keyword. That's why it's not showing this option available here. Let's go ahead and click on Create. Once the container is being created with appropriate permissions, this is what we have done. We have got the container created as images or pictures, whatever you want. And if you recall, this is what I was mentioning about. Private non-universe access, or you want anonymous access. Public access to blogs and containers. Right. Now, within this environment, within this container, which is representing a drive, I can go and upload any of the resources over here. I can go ahead and upload any of the resources over here. You are uploading these resources, uploading the files. What is the authentication type that you would want? Authentication option over here would be your Azure Active Directory. You can connect all requests to Azure Active Directory, or you can use an account key. As far as account key is concerned, once it comes to storage account, within storage account, from security perspective, you have something called as keys over here. which is called as access keys. If I go to access keys here, you will be able to see key 1, key 2. You can use any one of the keys to access your storage account. Right? Here it says when you are going for containers and you are trying to upload a file, it says what is the security that you want. I know that this is not an anonymous access. But what is the security that you want? You want to use the account key or you want to use the Azure AD user account. Choice is yours. Let me select a file over here. This is by default part of your storage account. It will automatically create those keys for you. Now, while you are using these blobs, you see there are 3 types of blobs that we have over here. Can you see the message here? Azure Blob Storage supports 3 blob types. Blob blobs, page blobs, append blobs. Once the blob is created, you can't change the type. While creating it or while uploading your resource, you have to decide what type of content is it. In our case, is it a VHT file? Is it a log file? That means it has to go to blob. Upload your VHT files. That should go as a page block. What is the block size that you want? Block size defines the quality of that content. I am not sure how many of you are aware about this. If you look at a lot of music videos or music audio files, people prefer to have a lower block size because that gives more clarity of sound. This is your file blobs, or the structure you have as smaller blocks that you have inside that file. You can choose whatever block size you want. In terms of access tier is concerned, I will cover this part a bit later. What is the significance of hot tier, cool tier, archive tier? I will cover this section. Like I said, this is a drive. If you want to create any folder inside this, if you want to create a folder inside this, you can do that. If you want to have any kind of encryption scope, you can mention that here. Like what we had in containers. Let's go ahead, click on upload. You realize that by specifying the folder name, we have got the folder here and we have got the file over here. If you look at the block access tier, there are 3 access tiers over here. First is your hot access tier. Now the question here is, how do I decide which is the appropriate tier for my resource? It totally depends upon what type of data that you are creating. Now, if you see this blob access tiers, this may not be relevant to an image that we have uploaded right now. But yes, this will be relevant for the backup contents that we are uploading. If you are uploading any kind of contents which is supposed to be accessed once in 30 days or which is supposed to be accessed once in 180 days, that is where you will choose between cooled tier or archived tier. Archive tier, if you see it says if you are not going to access the data for 180 days, at least 180 days. It can go beyond that as well. You may not be accessing that data for say 5 years or 10 years. There are certain compliance requirements or audit requirements for which you need to keep the data for at least 1 year or at least 5 years. Keeping that kind of requirements in mind, you can put this into archive tier. But I actually don't want to access it on a day-to-day basis. In terms of cool tier, if I want to access data, I want that data to be accessible only within that year's time. After that year is being passed, I can delete that data. You can put that into cool tier. Based on your frequency of accessing that content, you will be able to choose these things. Now, in your exam, you will have a lot of such questions where they will give you a scenario saying that this is a scenario, this is a requirement. What is the best kind of solution that you recommend? For a given scenario, what is the solution that you recommend? These attributes or these points that I'm mentioning over here, these will be helpful for you. Even in case of real world scenarios where you are working with these options, knowledge of these things and not just knowing it is sufficient, but able to map to it, say that this is a problem scenario which a customer is facing. And this is the option which can help to resolve it. If you look at the just give me a moment, we have discussed about log access tier over here. Now, once you have this resource created, let's go and check how do you access this resource. Let me copy this. Let me paste the URL here. Now you'll see, even though that resource is available, it says resource not found. What do you think could be a reason for it? Why is it not available? Here we have mentioned private access right. We have not mentioned anonymous access on the blob level or anonymous access on the container level. Right? The point which I wanted to show over here is, even if you have a RESTful API, it doesn't mean that you'll have access to the resources. It totally depends upon what is the access permissions being given. Is it accessible or not accessible? Apart from this, you'll see a number of details available here. Meta information also available with your content that you have uploaded. What are the versions that you would want? In case you want to take snapshots of it. From security perspective, you have Generate SS solution. You can see the image over here. Right. From a security perspective, there is an option of Generate SS. I'll come to this section a bit later. Once we talk about shared access signatures. Let's go to the next section over here, which is Lifecycle Management. What we mentioned earlier was in terms of resources that we are creating. You can choose tiers over here. Hot tier, cold tier, or archive tier. Now some of these things, you may do it cautiously. Some of these things you will do it cautiously, which means while uploading the file itself, you know that this file will be accessed once in a month. This file will be accessed once in 6 months. This content will be accessible or required only in a year's time. Right. Based on that, you can make your options over here. But for other type of content, you may want to go for creating a life cycle over here. Just one more thing which I should not forget. What's it? Now, the question here will be, when you put these things into different tiers, how does it matter? Is it only in terms of how much data we are storing? Is it only in terms of how much time I'm going to access this? Or does it have a cost impact? Right. Now, that's also very, very important. From a cost perspective, and this is a very important thing as part of the exam, right? Whether the case study requires it or not, almost every place you find this message, find this as a node. The customer is cost sensitive. Right. Or the customer is security sensitive. They will mention these things just to add a doubt in your mind or make sure you choose a low-cost solution. While you are solving that problem, solving that case scenario, you also focus on the cost piece of it. This is actually something which is relevant from a cost perspective as well. More and more data you have in hot tier, the cost will be higher. Whereas if you go to the cool tier or you go to archive tier, the cost will reduce over here. Archive tier also gives you an option of reducing the cost even if you have large amount of data. In terms of a blob lifecycle management, now here what we are saying is after certain set of days, maybe 30 days or 80 days, move from one tier to second tier. Right. Maybe if you want to delete some of the contents and you want to create a rule for that, you can create a rule over here. These are basically set of predefined rules that we are creating. These are the rules that we are creating to make sure we save on cost. Even see what will happen is you keep pushing in data, you keep uploading lot of information. But after a certain point in time, you will realize there is too much of cost going behind it. As an administrator or as an architect, you may recommend some of these predefined rules which will Azure will automatically scan through all the uploaded contents, check for what is the date of last modification. Based on that, it will start moving these things into relevant tiers. This is an advantage of using a blob lifecycle management. Files and folders that you are using for day in, day out basis. All those things will be part of your hot tier. Anything that you work on day-to-day basis. Let me give you an example for that. I am creating a website. That website has lot of images inside that. Now, all those and this website is being accessed by people on day-to-day basis. Now that images, should it be in hot tier, cold tier or archive tier? Hot. That would be a real world kind of scenario. That information I don't want to store into a database. But I am regularly accessing that information. That kind of details should go into hot tier. As far as cool tier is concerned, any kind of snapshots or backups that I am taking or I am getting multiple copies of that data myself. Some of that information should go into cool tier. I may refer back to this data once in a month just to reconcile or check for that information. Whereas archive tier, like I said, it is more from audit perspective, where you do not want to access it on daily basis, but you want to just show to the compliance team that yes, we have this information. And whenever required, we can extract the information from here and make it available. Now, one thing that you have to be careful about is it will take time to extract data from the archive tier. And it can go up to 24 hours as well. It is not just going and saying, give me the data and you start working with that. It doesn't work that way. Even if I give you some information, I say I would need it in a year's time. What are you going to do? You're going to, or if you want, even in your warehouse. If you're storing something, why do you store things in warehouse? Because I will not be accessing or using that material or that goods or normal purposes, right? But once it comes to retrieving that information, it will take time. If you have to go to warehouse, get that information from there, it will take time. Same thing goes to for archive storage as well. Then it will take a good amount of time to extract that information. Now, why am I saying this? If you are looking at archive tier as a DR solution, it's a wrong choice. I hope everybody is understanding that. If you're looking at archive tier as a DR solution, disaster recovery solution, that's a wrong choice to make. Because customers may not be ready to take up that much of downtime of 24 hours before you retrieve that information. Since we are mentioning about this over here, we are going to talk about the pricing factors. If you look at the pricing factors over here, one of the factors will be region, where you are creating your storage account. Second is amount of data being stored. That will be the second parameter. Third parameter is your access. What is the number of access requests that you have? Frequency. That will be the right term here. Frequency of access. If you look at amount of data stored, once it comes to premium tier, this will have maximum cost. Then followed by hot tier, then followed by cold tier, and the lowest cost that you have is archive tier. Whereas once it comes to frequency of access, maximum cost here is archive tier, then you have cold tier, then you have hot tier, and the minimum is premium tier. Cost will be maximum. Storage cost will be premium to archive, whereas access cost will be archive to premium. Why did you put into archive? Because I don't want to access it. But you are still going to access it. That means you are doing a mistake. Or if you are going into cool tier, which means I don't want to frequently access it. The more you access, higher will be the cost. If you are increasing the frequency of access, which means put it in hot tier, that will be easier for you. I was mentioning about Blob Lifecycle Management. Let me show you these features over here. If I go to Object Lifecycle Management, under Blob Service, I have Lifecycle Management. Let's add a rule over here. Whatever rule name that you want to create. Apply rule to all the blobs. Or you want to apply to specific blobs. It is up to you. Which type of files or which type of resources you want to apply the rule to. You can check that. If you want for all the blobs, first option is appropriate over here. what type of blobs you want to apply these rules. Blob, blob, blobs or append blobs. Like we said, block blobs is something which is any kind of content. Let's go ahead. Blob subtype. If you want to select or not, it is up to you. Let's select base blobs over here. You will realize that as far as these rules are concerned, they do not apply for VHD files. That is page blobs. Apart from that, it applies to other two of them. Let's add a condition over here. The base blobs were modified say 30 days ago. Modify date is 30 days ago. What do you want to do? I want to move it to quality here. If the modified date was say more than 180 days, then I want to move it to archive date. If the modified date is more than a year, I want to delete the blob. This may not be the best option because there are a lot of files which you may not be using, but you still need them. It is up to you whether you want to create this rule or not. Once you are done with this, you will get your rule created. You also can have a JSON view for this. This is your code view. This JSON will get automatically created depending upon the values that you have mentioned earlier. Let's proceed further. This was a quick look in terms of Blob lifecycle management. Once it comes to uploading of blobs, I think I have already discussed that. In terms of block size, in terms of authentication, type over here. What are the options available for accessing that content? You want to use account key or you want to use Azure AD user authentication. There are a number of tools that you can use over here. And one of the commonly used tools that you have is your AZ copy. This is a command line tool or command line resource available. Which can help you move your contents from on-premises environment to Azure or AWS environment to Azure. Right. Or if you want to move resources from one subscription to second subscription, in all these scenarios, you can make use of AZ copy. Now, second thing that you have is your storage data movement library. This is more in terms of your APIs. Through your APIs, you can use this, or else you can use your analytics tools like Data Factory to move contents. You can use blob views. I have not worked with blob views earlier. As far as data box is concerned, data box, import, export, these are some of the advanced services that you have. Where you want to transfer terabytes of data from your on-premises environment to Azure environment. In those scenarios, what you would do is you could write this data onto a device or an appliance and you can create it to Microsoft. Microsoft team will upload it on your storage account and allow you access to it. These are set of tools that we can work with. Let me show you one of the tools over here. For that, I will have to create a Cloud shell. While you are creating Cloud Shell, it asks you whether you want to create for Bash environment, that is CLI environment or PowerShell. You can select any one of them. Let me show you one of the tools over here. If you see pricing over here, the only price will be for the storage account. There is no other pricing involved with the Cloud Shell. If you look at the tool which I was talking about, it is AZ Copy. If you look at the options over here, there is a command line tool which can help you work with your storage account. If you look at the options available here, and you see number of pre-built examples. Copy from path to file text, that is local path to your Azure environment. PDF files are specific type of files you have to use. You can use your SAS tokens over here for secure copy. You can move content from one example over here for AWS as well. This one. S3 Amazon.com, copy from a bucket or a folder. Copy that to destination account within Azure. You can also do something like recursive too. All subfolders that you have, all the content that you have within those subfolders, even that will get copied over here. You can use AZ copy to transfer content from one environment to second environment. Now, these choices that we are supposed to make depends upon the size of data. If you have size of data in GBs, you can use AZ copy. If you have size in TBs, go for data box disk and import export service. If you have streaming content, use data factory. Whenever there is a files being put over here or data being put over here, I want to pick that data, I want to transform it, start doing the processing for that. That's when you go for data factory. If you look at pricing, I already mentioned about this. First is performance tier. What is the performance tier? Or tier cool tier, archive tier? Or you are going for HDD or SSD, that will define the performance tier. The data access cost, your transaction cost. How much of data you are retrieving or saving. That is your transaction cost. If you are using GRS or RAGRS, it will apply your application cost. And what is the download that you are doing? Any kind of download that you are doing, all that will be charged with outbound data transfer cost. Anything that you are uploading is free of cost. How much of the storage is there? If you want to change the storage tier, say from archive tier to hot tier, there will be charges for that as well. We have got the container created. We have uploaded a block blob over there. For downloading a block blob, that part is missing. Let me show you that option. For downloading, let me go back to my container. For downloading a block, I can do it because I have marked it as private. Private access. If I want to access it, there are two ways of doing it. One way is I can change the container permissions. I can change the access policy over here. I can change the access policy over here. Make it anonymous access or container read access. This will help me to get access to the contents. I have changed the policy. Let me go to the file. Let me copy the URL from here. Now you will be able to access these details. But this is not safe. Let me go back to my container once again. Change the access level to private. Remember we said while we are uploading this file, we said we will be able to access it using the key. Here, you see you can create a SAS token over here which is shared access signature. And by using this, while creating the SAS token, you need to mention what is the start date, what is the end date, what is the expiry for it, what is the IP address range that you would want over here. And based on the attributes, and you can specify start time, end time for it. What is the accessibility time that you have or the accessibility window that you have? Generate SAS token. You see the SAS token over here. The SAS token has number of attributes like what is the permissions that we have given, what is the start time, end time for it, what is the protocol being used, and what is the signature key that you want to use over here, signing key. All this information is part of your token. Once we are done with this, we can copy the blob SAS URL. Blob SAS URL means the base URL plus the token. Even if I have a private access, I can still go and access this content. This is because of the HTTPS. It is showing me like this. I don't have a certificate for that. Here, if you see I am able to access this content. I am able to access this content over here by using the blob SAS URL. Now, even what permissions? Even using that token, what access permissions you have to give. That permissions can be verified over here. You have to add write permissions, delete permissions. The user who is accessing it. What is the permissions that you want to give to that user? This was about creating a container, uploading a blob. While you are uploading a blob, you have to choose what is the tier that you would want. What is the block size that you would want when you are downloading? You have to download by changing the permissions, access permissions, or you have to allow download by using a SAS token. Even if you realize while you are working with AZ copy, we are seeing those examples at number of places. It was mentioning about SAS, URL. That's the safest way of downloading. That is safest and secured way of downloading any details. Let's proceed further. Now, quite a few things we have already discussed. There are other aspects as well in terms of security. Let's discuss that. Once it comes to storage account from security perspective, first thing that we have over here is your encryption. Right encryption solutions. Another aspect is authentication as part of encryption. Here, what we can do is we can use first of all any content that you have on Azure storage or within your Azure environment, whether it is data in transit or data at rest. All of it is by default encrypted and secured. Still, if you want to use your custom keys for encryption, you can use that. From authentication perspective, I don't have to mention anything because you have already seen that it supports key-based authentication or Azure Active Directory-based authentication. You can decide that. In terms of shared access signature, this is already what we saw. If you look at your options over here, I can use something called as shared access signature. I can have anonymous access. I can connect it using Azure Active Directory, or I can have something like shared key. I doubt if I have shown the shared key option. I will show you that example as well. If you look at the storage account keys for this, go to the keys section, access keys. And if I click on show keys, you will be able to see the key 1, key 2 options. What is the connection string for it? This connection string is generally used by developers in their APIs, like how you connect to SQL database using a connection string. Same way, you can do that by using storage connection string as well. Right, sorry. That's the first member. Here you can specify, you can regenerate the keys. If you think that a key has been compromised or there are too many people who are downloading that content, you can go ahead and change the key over here. I already showed you about shared access signature, how this works. You can specify your properties over here, what permissions you want, and there is not a radio button. These are checkboxes, which means I can have more than one permissions as well. Using the same SAS token, you can specify start time, end time. You can specify the time zone as well in terms of allowed IP addresses. Now, this is a very important thing. I want few set of users to access that content or access that information. I can specify those range of IPs over here. From protection mechanism, there are number of options that you have over here within your SAS token. This is something which I have already discussed about. The base URI and the SAS token details. Three things. One thing which I have done right now is I have done a service level SAS token for you. I showed that example. Another option that you have for SS token is, can you see this on the storage account itself? On the storage account, you have shared access signature. This is called as account level SAS token creation. Now, what is the difference here? Once you create a token over here, this will be available for all the services that I have selected over here. Blob service, file service, queue service for all services. What permissions do you want? You can be more specific in terms of what kind of permissions you want. What is the supported protocol that you want over here? Let's go ahead and click on Generate Size and Connection String. Now you see you have SAS tokens. There is only one SAS token, but you have SAS QRs for each of these. Let me copy this. Sorry, that will be a mistake. Let me copy the SAS token and put it over here. This is a SAS token and this is the URL of the file. If I want to access this file content, I need to combine both these members together. I have to combine this with the respective SAS token which has got generated. It doesn't matter where you generate this token. You have to combine both these resources and then you will be able to access your content. You can either generate a token on the file level itself or the service level itself or generate a token here. But once you have that token, you have to associate that with your file URL. The reason why I did not use this token is because if you see this token, it does not have the file name. Can you see this? Bastard 2004 Blob Core Windows Net. It does not have the file URL. If I copy this URL, I will still not be able to do anything with this because there is nothing stored over here. I need to have some file. If you see this URL, along with the base URL also has the file information. /images /motivation /name of the file. That's the difference between the storage account SAS token storage account SAS URL and the file-based SAS URL. Now, once it comes to policies over here or in context of policies, what we need to do is we need to use another tool over here which is called as Storage Explorer. Let me show you that. First thing is creation of a policy. Once you go to access policy, let's go ahead, add a policy over here. You can give whatever name you want. What is the permissions that you want to create over here? Rate, create and list. These are the policies. These are the permissions which I am giving. Let me mention the start date, end date over here. Right? I have a policy created over here. Once I have this policy created, how do I apply this policy? Now, that's the important part. To apply this policy, I will have to go to Storage Explorer. Using this Storage Explorer, get shared access signature. Using this policy, I can generate SS token. Can you see this? Here I can see Subhash policy. All these values, start time, end time, permissions, all these things are part of the policy itself. I don't have to mention it again. Right. Once I am done with that, I will be able to get the new SS token. Let me copy this token over here. You see over here it says I don't have all these parameters. All these parameters are grouped or created inside this policy called as Subhash policy. Let's go ahead and copy this URL and associate it over here. These are number of ways which I am showing you for accessing a given content. One is using file level SAS token. Second is accessing the content by using storage account as ASURLS token. And third, one is using a policy. Clear with this, everyone? 3 ways of accessing your contents. Let's move ahead. This was a quick look in terms of creation of SAS tokens. Shared access signature. Now, if you look at the next member over here, which is storage service encryption. Now, this is an important aspect like I mentioned earlier, and if you read the information here, it says whenever you have a storage service, whenever you have a service, the storage service is by default encrypted. The storage service is by default encrypted because of the storage account policies that we have within Azure. All data in transit, all data in rust has to be by default encrypted. Now the question over here is if in my on-premises environment I have a separate encryption and decryption, I have a different encryption key. On Azure, I have a different encryption key. Whenever there is a data transfer which keeps happening in these scenarios, it will take time to first encrypt that data using the key available on Azure and then store it. Similarly, once the data moves from Azure to on-premises again, you will have to encrypt that data with the key available within on-premises environment. And that will take more time in the transfer. To simplify that, what is recommended is you use a single key. You use the same key which is available on Azure or which is available in your on-premises environment. Now, since the data majorly is within on-premises, what we can do is we can export that key, export the encryption key on Azure. We import that into Azure and then we use the same key for encrypting Azure resources as well. Now, with that, what will happen? Even while we are transferring data between these two environments, the encryption key remains the same. There is no change in encryption key. That will speed up the data transfer. To make this possible, what we can do is, like I said, you can go to your key vault, upload that key or import that key over there. Then And then from your storage account, you can select your key, which is in the key vault. Once we are done with that, we will be able to encrypt all that information within your storage account using the same key which is there in your on-premises environment. Right now, I don't have on-premises key available, but here what I can show you is Key Vault. We have done this earlier for disk encryption set. Let me quickly create a Key Vault over here. Southeast Asia, it has to be the same location. Even if it is across resource groups, it doesn't matter. Access policy, whatever policy you want to create over here. Let's go ahead and click on Create. Let's go ahead and click on Create. Guys, we are doing maximum aspects over here. Create your resources. Because more and more hands-on you do, it will be easier for you. And I am not sure if I mentioned this earlier. In the exam, you also have lab questions. You are supposed to implement some of these things within your exam. I was mentioning about encryption. Let's go to encryption over here. And here we can choose customer managed key. In terms of selecting from Key Vault, we can specify a Key Vault over here and we can set an existing key that we have created. Once you associate it over here, what you are mentioning is, I don't want the Microsoft managed key. Instead, I want a customer managed key over here. If you want to create encryption scope over here, you can mention the name over here. Whatever scope you want. And you can specify your key over here as well. Now, here what we are doing is, even if you do encryption for a specific member, you can enable the scope. This is a quick look into manage keys. If you look at the next member over here in terms of security best practices, in our case, we have already mentioned all of these things. If you look at the key points over here, there are options for HTTPS as well. It is recommended to use HTTPS for SL-based encryption in terms of expiry dates that we have. You should not give a large span of time over here because that is something which is adverse of security. Right. What is the start time, end time that you want over here? Once your application becomes live, only then specify that start time over here. Correct. If you look at any of the data uploads that you are doing, there is no charge for uploading. But whenever anybody accesses that data, downloads that data, there will be a charge for it. Right? Depending upon what is the start time, end time you are mentioning, there will be charges accordingly. Right. If you look at your data over here, any data being written using SAS. SS token is only about access permissions. But if you want to check for the content of that data, you have to verify that content yourself. There is an option of storage analytics in your Azure Monitor. Now you can go to Azure Monitor. Go to storage accounts over here. And then you can go to storage accounts. And here you can see for each storage account how much has been the transaction. Server latency, checking for resources here, all those things you can check. If you look at your blobs, if you recall, while you are uploading the blobs, it said you can specify accessibility of these contents by using Azure Active Directory. Right. That is one of the options that we have over here. Now, what is the purpose of using Azure Active Directory? One of the primary aspects that you will see over here is creation of policies, generation of tokens over here. The key token generation of SS tokens over here using start time, end time. These are definitely some of the much secure ways of doing things, but this actually creates a new kind of security mechanism. If you want to reuse some of the existing members, like your Azure Active Directory, that is something which is not available here. That's not visible here. To make sure some of the options we have within Azure Active Directory can be applied over here. Secondly, there may be certain scenarios where you don't have the restrictions of date time. They should be accessible to the respective members within Azure Active Directory. Right. That's one. And secondly, people should be able to access it based on the rules which is there within rule-based access control. Remember, as part of the security, we have rule-based access control on that particular resource. Third thing that you see or third scenario that you see over here is earlier with SAS token. We don't have control over who's accessing it. Anyone who has SAS URL, whether he's part of your domain, whether a person is part of your domain or not doesn't matter. Right. Whereas if you look at Azure Active Directory, in that scenario, the person should be part of your domain, part of your Azure Active Directory. That's one. And second, that person should have required permissions. Outsider. If you have anybody, those people will not have access to your storage content. Right. That's the primary differentiator when you have resources authenticated using Azure Active Directory. And if you look at your Azure Active Directory, it by default has permissions in terms of OAuth or SAML token. Right? And like I mentioned earlier, you can have your role-based access control applied to it for authorization. If you see the role-based access control, you have storage blob data owner, contributor reader, right? If you recall, as part of Azure Active Directory, we have discussed about this where we said there are two sets of RBC. One is your Azure Active Directory RB and second is your Azure RBC. This is what is Azure RBK. Because here it is not talking about the global administrator or those permissions. Instead, it is talking about resource-specific access, resource-specific permissions. Once it comes to the scope, over here I can give a scope of individual container or a queue, or it could be the complete storage account itself. You decide where you want to apply these permissions, where you want to apply this role-based access control. We already are aware about the entire hierarchy over here. How this works. If you want to see the list of keys over here, you can specify your storage account list keys, where we can see all these permissions that we are talking about, role-based access control permissions. Let us see how this works. Let me show you this in action. Let's go to storage account. Within storage account, let's add a new storage account. Let's take replication as RS. Once it gets created here, I can go to Access Controller AM. Add role assignments. I can add a role over here. Remember we were mentioning about storage options. There are plenty of options here and there are plenty of them. Storage a data blob storage owner, reader contributor. And you want to assign these permissions to a specific member, say Bilin or Isabel. These are some of the sample users that we have created. This is giving permissions to a user on an account level. Let's go to the next section over here, which is containers. Let me add a container over here. Go to the next section. As far as this container is concerned, this storage container can associate with your Docker container as a file storage. I'll come to that section. I'm not sure which module it is. I'll come to that section there. Let's go ahead. Take up a file over here. Now, while we are uploading a file here, there is an option over here for Azure AD account. Upload to folder. Whatever folder name you want. Whatever block size you want, I'm going to mention over here. Gives me folder. Upload to Blob. I think I'm doing a mistake here. Let me correct this. Let me go back to Access Control IAM once again. Role assignments. Storage Blob Data Owner. Now let me try this. Let me go to Containers once again. Azure AD user account. Upload to contents. This is surprising because I've already added a permission to this user as a storage blob account owner. Why should it not do it ever? Here, if you see, there is an option called as authentication method. Let me switch to it. Now this could be a problem here. Azure role assignments may take up to 30 minutes to propagate because I have already mentioned that. I've already mentioned that user as part of my access control, IAM. I don't think that is done as of now. That's why it's giving me error. I've already specified the rule for Dylan Williams and even for the owner of this account. I think that is taking time. Once that part is being done, I should be able to access these resources. Because that's the only thing what I think is going wrong. Apart from that, all the related actions what I have done, that is assigning rule to the user, that part is being done. And then I can go and upload resource over here. And finally, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.